Hello, everyone. We are reading chapter 16 of Paola Santiago and the River of Tears by Taylor K. Mejia. Chapter 16 starts on page 176. The title of Can someone read me? What is the title of chapter 16? Who's going to tell me? Tell me, Jocelyn.
Fine. Truth is a side of an object.
Humiliation. Truce with a side of abject humiliation. Thank you. Oh, Camila's back. Ready? Camila, we're on page 176. Hold on. Teresa is texting me.
Her internet's bad, that's why.
Okay. Pao awoke gasping in her bedroll with no idea of how long she'd been asleep. Emma! She cried, reaching out before she realized the river was gone and the dream had ended at last. Dawn was breaking in the cactus field, leaving the horrors of the night in the past. Pao rolled over, stretching her stiff muscles, getting ready to wince her way to her feet. Then she froze. Sometime while she'd been dreaming about killing him, Dante had placed his sleeping bag right next to hers. He could be infuriating. He cared too much about what other people thought. He valued things that Pao couldn't even understand. But he was also trusting, loyal, not afraid to be exactly who he was. Dante loved with his whole self, and he protected what he loved, and Pao wouldn't let anyone put him in danger for it. She knew what she had to do. Who's Franco? Marisa hadn't been hard to find. She was on her throne in front of the mess tent, just staring into cooking fire like she was remembering something that had happened 1,000,000 years ago. Spread out on the ground in front of her was a handkerchief, and whatever was on top of it sparkled in the dancing flames. Excuse me, Marisa asked. Franco, Pao repeated, letting her anger infuse every word. Do your little lackeys know about him? Do they know he's a kidnapper and a thief? That he stole kids from their families and they were never seen again? For the first time since they'd come face to face, or knife to ribs anyway, Marisa looked almost afraid. How on earth? It doesn't matter how I know, Pao said, trying to sound spooky and ominous. But I do, and I want you to give me one good reason why I should trust you, because, Pao trailed off. She had just gotten close enough to see what was laid out on the handkerchief. One half of a friendship locket, a bracelet with a star charm, a ring like Emma's with a sapphire star instead of a ruby heart. You were working with him, Pao said, her body cold despite the warmth of the fire. You knew what he was doing, and you helped him. Marisa pinched the bridge of her nose like Pao had seen her mom do 1,000,000 times. It was typically when Pao was asking a lot of impossible questions. Come to think of it, Pao's usual instinct was to fill the silence, but in this instant, she waited. It was Marisa's call which way this was going to go. Sit down, Marisa said at last. Why would I sit down with a kidnapper? Marisa actually chuckled. Because I'm not one, and neither was Franco. Let me explain. Pao didn't intend to believe a word she said, but she obeyed her order and sat. Marisa just had the effect on people. Franco was the leader of Los Niños, she said, when Pao was settled. He was my friend. He recruited me when I was wandering lost in the cactus field. He gave me a new home. Pao waited, even though she had 1,000 more questions. We grew close quickly, and then Naomi came, and the three of us were inseparable. Franco had been here for generations, fighting the ahogados, protecting the town, but he thought there was more to the job than that. Wait, Pao said. Generations? The boy in the video footage hadn't looked any older than 18. Our leaders become immortal when they take the flame, Marisa said, like it was a throwaway fact. You mean eat the flame, right? Again, Marisa looked shocked at how much Pao knew. Pao motioned for her to keep going. Right, said Marisa. It's how we remember. But you don't remember your family, Pao asked. Is that the price for getting them? Marisa smiled, wanly shaking her head. I haven't forgotten my family, as much as I would like to. But when I took the flame, I inherited the memories of every leader before me. And since the fire was lit 100 years ago, it makes the mind a little crowded. Some things naturally fall by the wayside. For a minute, Pao forgot the reason she was there. So you remember me? Remember what? Marisa looked genuinely curious, and Pao wondered how much to tell her, whether it would change things. I knew you, she said. In Silver Springs, we went to the same school. Paola Santiago? She waved. Marisa's eyes widened for a fraction of a second, and then they returned to their timeless stare. We didn't like each other very much, said Pao. Marisa laughed a little at that. I'm sorry, she said. From what I remember, I wasn't always pleasant, but I had my reasons. She paused, her face twisting in pain. It's over now. This is my home. So why are you stealing kids and keeping them here? You and Franco. Franco risked his life, Marisa said, an edge to her voice. He never harmed anyone. He was searching for an important artifact, one that would give him access to the rift. He believed we could stop the monster attacks if we could get inside, but what? Pao asked when Marisa was quiet for too long. He died trying. He never found the key. He saved us, but he couldn't. Pao waited as Marisa pulled herself together. Franco knew of another opening between worlds, somewhere up north, where the magic wasn't mala. He believed that our rift had somehow gotten corrupted. By what? Pao asked, immediately on edge. We never got far enough to find out. Marisa's gaze grew, even more distant for a moment, and then she shook her head. He asked Naomi and me to go with him to the spot where the field meets the Gila, the most dangerous part of this area. We agreed, of course. We wouldn't have denied him anything. Pao thought Marisa's eyes sparkled a little when she talked about him. Pao didn't know much about love, except that what most people called love was actually just an overproduction of the oxytocin hormone in the brain. But she did know a lot about crushes, and it looked like Marisa had a big one on Franco. The only thing we had to go on was a line from an ancient poem he found while he was researching rifts. Franco said the key would reflect the light of the wearer's soul. He was convinced that meant the key was a jewel. But Marisa gestured to the jewelry on the handkerchief. Wait a minute, Pao said. The wearer. Those were innocent people, right? That's why you were stealing jewelry from them? We told them what was at stake, Marisa tried to explain. Of course, most of them didn't believe us. And you just expected them to hand over their prized possessions? Pao asked incredulously, thinking about how much Emma's ring had meant to her. We didn't have much time for discussion, Marisa protested. We had to protect them from the ahogados. Those infernal spirits were always right behind us. And did you? Pao pressed. Did you save any of the wearers? Marisa shook her head. In the silence that fell between them, Pao pictured it. Franco, Marisa, Naomi, thinking they were heroes preparing to vanquish evil. Instead, they were no better than common thieves, and they left the ahogados right to their victims. Pao struggled to remain calm. She needed to hear more about what had happened to Emma. Finally, the time came. Marisa went on. The river was getting low. Franco said going into the rift when the barrier was weak would be our only chance, and he would have to enter without the key. I tried to talk him out of it, but he believed he could make it through, and we believed in him. No doubt about it, Pao thought. Mega crush on Franco. We spent hours searching for the place where we thought the rift would appear. We believed it would open during the third quarter, and we were right. Once we found it, we intended to return to camp and wait for the solstice when the veil would be thinnest, but they descended on us before we could get away. Hordes of them, and we never stood a chance. Ahogados? Pao asked, not sure she wanted to know. Marisa nodded. There were hundreds of them, maybe thousands. The rift opened and they poured out like smoke. We fought, but they never stopped coming. There was no way to escape. Pao waited as Marisa regained control of her emotions, pressing her hands against her knees. Franco had an arma de alma, so he was better off than we were, the older girl continued at last. He told us to leave him, but we didn't want to. Finally, he managed to convince us. We ran, but as soon as we felt it was safe, we hid and looked back. We watched as the ahogados drained his life force. We watched as he... Marisa couldn't go on. She wasn't crying exactly, but she covered her mouth with one hand and curled her shoulders inward. Pao almost felt bad for asking her to drag it all up, but she was too busy wondering, hypothesizing. We're at the top of page 182. After the ahogados took him, Naomi recovered his things. The ahogados had no use for them. Marisa waved a hand over the bits of jewelry. They're all we have left of him now. Naomi's silver hair, Pao thought. Is that what happens when you fight an ahogada? Your life force is partially drained? And what happened to Franco's arma de alma? It was such a powerful weapon. Why hadn't it been enough to save him? But Pao didn't articulate any of those questions. Instead, she asked, and then you ate fire to be the leader? It's what you do, Marisa said, before Pao could describe what she'd seen in her dream. It's how you tie yourself to the luz, to the cause. He chose me before we left him. My life is connected to the magic of the rift now, no matter where I go. We're all protected from aging inside the boundaries of camp, but as leader, I'll be immortal, and as long as I serve the light. Unless the ahogados get you like they got him, Marisa nodded soberly. He's only been gone 3 days, she whispered. Sometimes I think he's going to walk out from behind a cactus and take back his rightful place. Pao felt guilty again. She'd accused Marisa of succumbing to evil, but hadn't she saved Pao from Ondina, despite her shady methods of trying to find the key? Marisa was a well-intentioned, grieving girl who had been forced to assume leadership under the most difficult of circumstances. And what was Pao? Pushy, angry, stubborn? You were wise to ask me about Franco, Marisa said when Pao didn't reply. Trusting the wrong people in this world can be the end of you. Your friend is eager, wide-eyed, but you're discerning, capable. You'd make a fine leader. Thanks, Pao said, surprised at Marisa's appraisal, so different from her own. Just don't ask me to eat any burning coals, okay? Marisa smiled, and in the light of the fire, Pao could see scarring on her lips from the ember. Too soon? Marisa shook her head. Franco was just as irreverent as you are. The silence that followed was comfortable for a change, but it couldn't last. There was still so much to be done. If Franco wasn't the one stealing the kids, Pao asked, who is? Marisa hesitated. Franco had theories about it, that the rift feeds on children, that their life forces fuel the corrupted source of magic. I have his memories, but his conclusions weren't complete. He believed that the ahogados and the manos and everything else are just soldiers for the general inside the void. But he never found out who or what it was. And now? Oh God, Pao said, interrupting Marisa, who stopped, looking concerned by the terror on Pao's face. Oh God. What is it? Missing children, Pao said, and her voice sounded far away to her own ears. The monsters, the general. Santiago, spit it out! Pao gathered her thoughts, the lifetime of tales, the strange things she'd seen today alone, a week ago, even a day ago, but she never thought she'd be offering this as a viable solution. My mom's stories have always turned out to be true, Pao said, looking Marisa dead in the eye, and her scariest one was about a woman who stole children by the river. The older girl watched her intently. Marisa, I think I know who the general is. If they were in a movie, this would have been the moment when the soundtrack swelled just before the big reveal. I'm listening, Marisa said. I think it's La Llorona. Instead of climactic movie music, Marisa's reaction was the sound of a record scratch. Pao had been expecting a dropped jaw, a hand clapped to the forehead, something, anything to indicate amazement. Instead, Marisa held a hand to her mouth, eyes sparkling, clearly trying not to laugh. Pao's cheeks heated up, irritation flaring as the horror of her realization waned. Oh, so chupacabras and some minor folktale about hairy hands are real, but La Freaking Llorona makes you giggle? She knew how childish and defensive she sounded, but she couldn't help it. Sorry if my who's who and fairy tales that come to life manual is outdated. She folded her arms and Marisa lowered her hand. I'm sorry, the older girl said, amusement still playing around the corners of her mouth. You're not off track about La Llorona. Most of the local folktales were inspired by creatures from the rift. So she's real? Pat asked. She was, Marisa said. But come on, a sad woman who lost her mind and drowned her kids only to regret it, a ghost who can't stop crying, isn't exactly a threat. Franco said he dispatched her in his first week as leader. She was nothing more than a nuisance. Pao thought this wasn't a very feminist assessment, but she was too busy being annoyed about every Riverside birthday party she'd missed for no reason to say anything. Don't be embarrassed, Marisa said. It's an understandable theory for someone who's been here less than 2 days. It's just the general we're looking for will have a lot more in his arsenal than the ability to wail really loud at night. Noted, Pao mumbled, wondering when her cheeks would cool, or if they ever would. She was a scientist. Even if ghosts and monsters were real, Pao would jump to a premature conclusion which was so unlike her. This place must be getting to me, she thought. So you were going to ask your friend? Marisa prompted when Pao's humiliated silence had stretched so on long enough. My friend? Pao said. Emma, right? She shook her head, vowing to leave this uncharacteristically gullible moment in the past. Franco tried to take her ring, and you said the ahogados were usually right behind you guys. So does that mean they got her? Is she in the void now? I don't know, Marisa said. If I did, I would tell you. It's not a bad theory, but there's no way to find out for sure. No way besides going into the rift ourselves. Marisa's silence was an answer enough. She was obviously still haunted by the memory of a boy who had just tried to do just that. But Pao couldn't be bound by Franco's failures. If there was any chance Emma was still alive and her "don't give up on me" message in the dream was real, Pao had to know. We'll fight with you, Pao said decisively as she got to her feet. If you'll still have us. Gladly, Marisa said, rising. Also, and thank you. There's one condition, Pao said, matching the leader's determined gaze. We'll fight with you until the solstice, but we won't be joining Los Niños de la Luz. We fight as ourselves, as tourists. And in exchange, you tell me everything you know about the rift. And the key. My main goal is still to rescue my friend. If I can find a way into the void, I'll have to take it. Marisa nodded. I understand. A good leader doesn't leave her people behind. Her face crumbled when she added, I shouldn't have left Franco. She took a shuddering breath and then said, You have my support. When Marisa extended a hand for her to shake, Pao accepted it. Finally, she was moving forward. Pao shook Dante awake. He snorted as he emerged from sleep, and she laughed. Shut up, he said. What do you want? I want you to take out that fancy club of yours, hero boy. I just told Marisa we'd fight with the Niños de la Luz. She said the name of the group with as much fake, goofy gravitas as she could. For real? Dante asked, sitting up, his hair flat on one side and sticking out crazy on the other. This time, Pao smoothed it down for him, smiling when his cheeks flashed. For real. But there's more. I think I know where Emma is. So we fight until we can figure out how to get there, and then we go. Deal? Of course, deal. He got to his feet, and Pao straightened up. They shifted awkwardly for a moment before Dante stepped forward and hugged her tight. Sorry I said you were jealous. Sorry I called you a meathead. When they finally let it go, it felt like all was right with the world, which was how they should have known something awful was going to happen.